David and Del to talk about how they met, how long they've been playing music together, stuff that goes back to the city bluegrass scene of the early 60s. And while we haven't had a chance to put this together in any formal way, I'm going to ask David at some point to give us some stories about our old buddy at Philadelphia Folk Festival, Winnie Winston, who I know we played with for years. And Winnie was an icon of his own around here. And I'm going to ask Del to have some things to say about Oliver Bell Reed, who is another hero of ours, been gone for quite some time. So, with that in mind, how did you guys ever get together and when did it start?
Well, I saw the first gig that Del ever played with Bill Monroe and his Bluegrass Boys.
My first trip to New York City.
I was a student at NYU and a protege of folks like Ralph Rinsler, and for a student, Ralph was a neighbor of mine in Passaic, New Jersey, and I was going to NYU in 1963, and they started an organization called the Friends of Old Time Music and started bringing traditional performers up to the city. And, I believe it was in February or March of 1963 that they put on a concert at Bill Monroe and his Bluegrass Boys. And Bill had Jack Cook on guitar, great singer and guitar player from the Baltimore area, originally from Virginia, and Bessie Lee, the Carolina Songbird, was playing bass, and Kenny Baker was playing fiddle, and this young man, who I'd never heard of or seen, Del McCoury, was playing 5-string banjo, and he played great. There's a tape made of that concert, which is, he played flawless banjo, but I went back and met these guys. I had already met Bill Monroe through Ralph, and that's when we met. And
that was the first time, Ralph, later, I guess after that, started managing Bill Monroe then, and that's when I got to know Ralph Rinsler really well. And that's when I met David Grisman. It was in 1962 or 3?
63, yeah.
63, okay.
And we stayed in touch, and there's an interesting story about Del. I guess Bill Monroe invited him, asked him to join the band at that time.
He did.
You can tell that story. This is usually part of our act.
Yeah, it is.
We tell these stories, but we only get an hour tonight, so that's good. We can get rid of this part.
Yeah. We're the premier part of our act tonight. But
We'll be here till Thursday, folks. 3 shows a day.
Well, I tell you, that was my first time playing with Bill Monroe, because I had seen Bill Monroe a lot, but never got to play with him. I got to play through Jack Cook, who was a great rhythm guitar player and singer, and I was working banjo with Jack at the time. And so Bill offered me a job at that time. We played in New York City, and for some reason I didn't accept at the time, because I liked playing with Jack, because we were more the same age, we were both pretty young. And so, but then another buddy of mine named Bobby Diamond, if you remember him, he said, "Hey, now, I'll tell you what, a lot of guys would kill to get that job. You ought to go down and take that job, So he finally talked me into going down and going to work for Bill Monroe. So I went down, and Bill told me, he said, "Now, when you get to town, he gave me his phone number. He said, you call me up, and if you take a notion to come down to Nashville, So when I got there, I called him up, and he said, okay, I'll be in there in the morning. He said, now get a room at the Clarkston Hotel up on 7th Avenue, and called me up. So I did, and he said, I'll be in there in the morning. Well, he came in the next morning at a certain time. I don't know what time it was, pretty early. And he said, I'll meet you in the lobby. Well, when I got to the lobby, there was another guy there with a banjo. And we didn't get a chance to introduce each other. You know, I kind of wanted to meet this guy. And he might have wanted to meet me, I'm not sure. But anyway, we didn't get a chance to talk. About that time, Bill Monroe walked in the lobby. And he said, boys, follow me. And well, he didn't introduce us or anything, you know. So we just followed Bill Monroe like two little puppies, you know. And there was a restaurant just outside the lobby there. So we went in there and he bought our breakfast and he never said nothing, you know. He just, that kind of guy, he just didn't talk much. And so we just ate. It was pretty quiet. And so he said when we got done, he paid for our breakfast. And then we went next door to a place called the National Life and Accident Insurance Building. National Life and Accident Insurance Building. They had a big building next door, and that's where they had the Friday night opera. So there was a room there. I don't know what floor it was on, but he took us in this room, and I noticed there was a brown Gibson guitar case sitting over there in the corner of this room, and it just happened to be Bill Monroe's guitar. And he just left it there, you know, all week long, because somebody would be playing it on the weekend, you know. He never knew who it was going to be, I guess, at the time. And so he auditioned both of us guys. By the way, the other guy's name was William Bradford Keith. And so he auditioned us in 2 ways. He had me play guitar and sing, and he had Keith play the guitar and sing, and then he had me play banjo, and he had Keith play the banjo. And he told me, he said, now I'll tell you what, you're going to play guitar, and you got to learn some of my songs, because you know he'd been recording since 1939, I guess, with his own band. So I had to learn some of those songs, you know. And anyway, that's the way he hired us, was that way, and I'm glad he did, because I got to hear Bill Keith play banjo, and I thought, now this is something that Bill Monroe really needs. He really did need that at the time. And so the rest is history as far as banjo playing goes, you know.
At the first Philadelphia Folk Festival in 1962, we had a banjo contest that we continued for 4 or 5 years. The winner got a Mastertone banjo, new one, and 10 minutes on the stage at night. And Keith won that in 1962.
Wow.
It was epic.
Yeah.
Of course, we lost Bill
That's
in the
true.
last year. He was here about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And, it's glad we got it on. David, how did you get started in the bluegrass business?
Well, you know, I always loved music, and of course I was around when rock and roll exploded. People like Chuck Berry and Buddy Holly and Elvis and Little Richard and
Jerry Lee.
Jerry Lee Lewis, and all of that was very exciting. I was from New Jersey, and there was a station in New York that played the top 50 records every day, and I mean, whereas the top 10 might not have been that great, but you know, there was just everything, and they'd start with number 50 and go down the line. So I heard all this incredible, you know, Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, you know, the Five Satins, you know, all kinds of stuff that I really liked. But around 1958, 59, all of a sudden, all this really great stuff kind of evaporated. And Elvis went to the Army, Buddy Holly got killed, Chuck Berry, I guess, went to jail. Jerry Lee Lewis got blacklisted for marrying his 13-year-old cousin.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, all this cool stuff just was gone. Little Richard found the Lord.
All that was left is bluegrass?
All that was left was Leslie Gore. You know?
Yeah.
But
And she's
I heard
going.
the Kingston Trio, and that kind of resonated with me. And I had a friend. There were three of us misfits in Passaic Junior High, and one of them had an FM radio, and he kept telling us about there's this kind of music called bluegrass. Now, he had been listening to the Oscar Brand radio show on WBAI, and the banjo player was Roger Sprung, who I just saw for the first time in about 50 years. And this friend of ours, Jack Scott, kept telling us about this Scruggs-style banjo. So one day, Jack came back. We used to go into New York City, take the number 30 bus, and he came back from Sam Goody's record store with an album called Mountain Music Bluegrass Style. And he called us Folkways, yep. Called Fred Weiss, the other friend who we just lost, and myself, and you got to get over it and hear this stuff. So we went over to Jack's house, and he had already picked out the cut on that record to play for us, which was White House Blues by Earl Taylor and the Stony Mountain Boys. The banjo player named Walter Hensley, very fast Scruggs style. And he put that needle down on that record, and that changed my life. And we got real excited about that, and folk music, traditional folk music. So we wanted to form a folk music club in high school, and I went to my favorite high school or junior high school English teacher, whose name was Elsie Rinsler, and asked her if she'd help us form a folk music club, and she said, "Oh, I have a cousin, Ralph, who is a professional folk musician." We're going, "Oh yeah, sure." Turned out Ralph Rinsler was the mandolin player in the Greenbrier Boys, the first New York City bluegrass band, and he came into my junior high school English class one afternoon with a mandolin, a banjo, and a guitar, and he gave a little talk and demonstration of folk music, and we just flipped out. And turned out he lived 4 blocks away. He had also been a student of my mom. My mother was an art teacher, and he was 12 years old when he was her student, and he remembered her bringing me into class when I was 2. Anyhow, we started just going over his house late at night because he had a job. He was selling tickets for BOAC Airlines in New York City. We'd get home about 10 p.m. We'd go over there, and he turned us on to everything, from Charlie Poole to Jimmy Martin, and helped us with our instruments, and this was an amazing guy. And one day in the summer of 1962, Sunday morning, the phone rang. It was Ralph. He said, "I'm going down to hear Bill Monroe in Rising Sun, Maryland. You want to come?" Well, naturally, you know the answer. That was the first time I heard Bill Monroe, and I hadn't been that into Bill Monroe because it was that voice was just a little too, hard to take. But when I heard it come out of a body, that changed my life again. And in the opening, they always had
It was a little different from Tom Dooley, wasn't it?
Yeah. And they always had an opening local band, and that day they had a band called Marvin Howell, Frankie Short, and the Franklin County Boys.
Yeah.
And they had a young guy playing mandolin named Frank Wakefield. So I heard Bill Monroe and Frank Wakefield for the first time the same day, and I got the actual incorrect impression that all bluegrass mandolin players sounded like that. When in fact, there was about the only 2 guys that really, Frank was about as close to Bill Monroe in 1962, or 61 actually, 61, August 61. And I heard them playing duets backstage, and another thing that happened, somebody in the audience, and the audience was about as big as this, on wooden benches, and somebody kept yelling, "Toy Hard, Toy Hard," was one of Bill's songs, and Bill kept ignoring him, and finally this guy said, "If you can't play it, Jack Cook can." And I guess Jack Cook was there. And Bill Monroe looked at this guy and he said, "If I can't play it, nobody can." So that really impressed me, probably as much as the music.
That's really great. Was that concert down at Sunset Park?
No, that was at New River Ranch.
Yeah.
That was very close to Sun, but that was in Maryland. That was in Rising Sun, Maryland.
Right.
And then we used to go down, you know, as you mentioned, Winnie Winston, who was really the, if not the best, close to it in New York, banjo player at the time. And we became friends, all these young guys who were like urban college kids for the most part, got interested in this real traditional music. And we all met each other. People like Jody Stecker and Winnie and Steve Mandel, who I just saw recently in Nashville. And we'd go to Washington Square Park on every Sunday afternoon. And there'd be little pockets. There'd be, you know, blues singers. There'd be old-time music. There'd be these political protest guys, singer-songwriters. And then there'd be the bluegrass guys. And that's how we got started.
How long have you two guys been playing with each other?
Well, we met, you know, in '63, and I would go hear that band with Del and Bill Keith as much as I could, and I'd take a tape recorder off, and you could record these shows. In fact, one of them recorded, we ultimately put out on a CD, live at Mechanics Hall. It's in Massachusetts. But I would go hear this band and got to know Del. And Bill Keith was a good friend of mine too. We had met in that same time period, a little earlier actually. And Bill Keith helped me get Dawg music off the ground too. We learned Opus 57, and we were good friends. And in 1966, I got offered the princely sum of $200 to play a concert in Troy, New York at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And that was a lot of money, probably more than Bill Monroe paid. I think he paid $27.50 a show. So I called up this guy and hired him and his brother Jerry, who was a great bass player. And by that time we had played, Jerry and I had played with Red Allen. That's another story, getting hired by Red Allen. I had started producing records, and I was able to hire Del and Jerry McCoury and Winnie Winston, and we drove up to Troy, New York. These guys picked us up in New York. They were living in Pennsylvania, I think.
Yeah.
And we rehearsed in the car singing, and went and played this show and made $50 a piece. And I was doing help by that time, helping Ralph Rinsler with some of his projects, and I had his Nagra tape machine. That was a really great Swiss machine, and one microphone. I took it up there and recorded this concert. And there's an album called Early Dawg, where a bunch of the tunes we played are on that. And then later, I don't know whether it was later or earlier that year, Del just reminded me, we were visiting his house and he had a picture. We were both at the first and second, I don't know, were you at the first?
I wasn't at the first, but you were.
I was at the,
Yeah, I didn't even know about
a guy
the
named
first
Carlton Haney started the Bluegrass Festival thing in 1965 at Fincastle, Virginia, better known as the Roanoke Bluegrass Festival. But I went there in 65 and 66, and in 66, Del was there and they asked me if I'd play a set with him there. And so we played our first two gigs in 1966. Later this year in December, we're going to have a reunion. We're going to Jerry McCoury, and the banjo player on the set at Fincastle was Chris Warner.
Chris Warner.
And we're going to do some gigs with those two guys at the end of the year. Celebrate 50 years of playing together.
Apropos of not too much, I think I should mention that if these stories are the kind of thing you'd like to get more of, you might try listening to Dell's show on Sirius XM radio. I think it's channel 61, right?
It is.
And the
62, yeah, they moved it, didn't
62?
Yeah, they did. They did.
I didn't know that. But in any event, it's something you should listen to because it's not just one record played after another. Del gets to pick the music, and he gets to talk about it, and it's quite a couple of hours every week. So if you haven't caught on to that, you should. Del, I don't.
I'll tell you, Andy, the most interesting stories you can't tell on radio.
You can tell them.
Can't even tell them here.
I guess it's no secret to even those meeting you for the first time today that you didn't start out in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, actually I did.
And
I sure did. The first music I played, we lived in York County.
I remember that.
York County, how about that?
Yes.
With the Dixie Pals?
Yes, I had a band called the Dixie Pals. Sure did. Back then, after I quit Bill Monroe. Of course, I went to California first and then moved back to York County. And,
I think he's talking about where you were born.
Yeah.
oh, actually, I was born in PA. It's been written that I was born in North Carolina. That's where my folks are all from. They're from Mitchell County, North Carolina. And also my wife's people, too. They're all from Mitchell County, western North Carolina. But my parents moved up there. And I was the first born in York County, and there was 3 born down there and 3 born up here, or wherever. And so, and that's where we listened to the Grand Ole Opry back in those days, because when I was a kid, there was no TV. If there was, I didn't see one. But we listened to the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday night, and of course, Bill Monroe just happened to be on there.
The first time that I ever saw you play, probably a gig I would bet you don't remember, but we used to have a club in Philadelphia called the Second Fret.
We were just talking.
Yeah. And the Greenbrier, the Fret had, they did it right. They would hire a band or an artist for the weekend. So it was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night, not just one night. And the Greenbrier boys were one of the stalwarts down there.
We were just talking about that.
Really?
Yeah.
And, one night, the Greenbriers are there, and John Harrell, for some reason, could not make it. And the lights come on, and there's the other two, and Del McCoury playing with the Greenbrier boys. And I don't know whether you remember that.
I do. I remember that.
It was quite a different sound, I would say.
Well, I'll tell you what happened to John Harrell, that is. I think he had a car accident and he had a collapsed lung. So he couldn't sing, and Frank, guess what? Frank Wakefield was the mandolin player in that band at the time. And he was working part-time in a shop where they put windshields in cars, and he dropped the windshield on his hand like this, corner to the edge, and he broke some fingers, so he couldn't play. So Ralph Rensler was playing the mandolin, and Bobby Allen was the only one that was still there, from the Greenbrier boys. Yeah, I remember it well. Actually, we did 2 weekends. We did that first weekend, and then of course we were off for a few days, and then did the second weekend.
Yeah, a lot of them folk clubs hired you for, Birdie's Folk City, you played for 2 weeks. Yeah. You played 2 weeks there.
Yeah.
David, tell us something about the New York Ramblers.
The New York Ramblers, we started out calling ourselves the New York City Ramblers. There was this the Union Grove Fiddlers Convention was in North Carolina, Union Grove, North Carolina. I went down there with some friends in 1963 just to check it out. You know, this little, I mean, Union Grove is like a crossroads in the highway. It's a population probably 200 people, like a general store and probably a gas station and the high school. And every Easter weekend they would turn it, and thousands of people would go there for this fiddlers band contest. And that's where Ralph Rinsler rediscovered Clarence Ashley, and all these bluegrass and old-time musicians would come to that place. So 63, I believe I met Pete Rowan there in 63. I was 18, you know. The next year, and all these young kids from like the cities, Philadelphia, New York, out on the West Coast, Berkeley, you know, started meeting each other. And a young guy had come out from San Francisco area, a guy named Eric Thompson, showed up in Greenwich Village where I was living and had my $58 a month, 5-story walk-up apartment in Greenwich Village. And I was working for Israel Young at the Folklore Center and Mark Silver at Fretted Instruments. They were next to each other. And Eric Thompson shows up. He was about 19, and he stayed with me, crashed on my living room floor for a couple of months. And he was a really good guitar player. And a bunch of us decided to go to the Union Grove contest in that year. And they would, if you entered the contest, they would give you a certain amount of money on your travel expenses. So we formed a little band just to play in the we weren't really serious about, you know, the contest. But so it was Winnie Winston, Eric Thompson, myself, a fiddle player named Gene Lowinger, and my friend Fred Weiss played bass. And we drove down there. And you played in 3 different places. You played in the high school auditorium, which held about 200 people, and then the gymnasium, which held about 1,000 people, and then they had this big tent, which held about 2,000 or 3,000 people. And we played tunes like Rawhide and Follow the Leader, and the Don Reno instrumental, and we won the contest. That was still, to this day, the most exciting thing that's ever happened to me. I was signing people's Bibles. And so we just called ourselves the New York City Ramblers. And we came back, we brought these trophies back and these ribbons. And so we kind of formed a band and started playing gigs.
The band always seemed to morph, you know.
Well, Eric went back to California. We got Jody Stecker. He played guitar. He and I were the 2 young hotshot mandolin players in the New York scene. In fact, one summer around that time, the Greenbrier, Ralph Rinsler was not doing a big tour with the Greenbrier Boys, and they auditioned both Jody and myself, and of course Jody got the job. He was a much better singer than me, probably a better mandolin player too, but
Probably not.
but anyhow, we were all friends, and so Jody, he was just happy to play guitar as well. So then he came in and played guitar. And I believe we played some gigs at Gertie's Folk City. In fact, one time Earl Scruggs and his wife were in New York and came down and heard us set, and we didn't even know they were there. They sent us a letter after that. Louise had said they enjoyed the show and everything.
Yeah, Del, you must have spent a little bit of time at Sunset Park yourself. Huh?
I sure did, yes.
Tell us something about that place, because it's been gone and nothing comes along to replace it.
No.
I know. You know, I started playing, or I started going there, you know, back. Actually, Ola Bell and Ellie, her brother, had a band, and they actually
At
started.
Sunset Park, here's this guy, Jerry Garcia, and we did some jamming in the parking lot there, like you say. That's where we, jammed with a lot of great pickers there, and we became friends and stayed in touch and through the years.
Yeah, there was a double bill there when Bill Monroe and Doc Watson were touring together, and we were at Sunset Park one Sunday. Out in the parking lot, there's this huge crowd around Doc, and he whips off this famous version of Blackberry Blossom that he always played. Pretty difficult piece. And 3-4 minutes later, he stops and everybody's going like this, and then some kid asks him, "Doc, will you play Blackberry Blossom?" It didn't go over well. We're wondering, anybody out there have a question or any comment you want to address? We'll be happy to take the questions.
I see we're way in the back here.
David, I'd like you to talk to us about how it came that you got Stefan Grappelli to
Stefan Grappelli.
What about Stefan?
How did that come about?
How did that come about? Okay. Well, Stefan, Eric Thompson actually turned me on to Django and Stefan, I guess back around 1965, and I didn't even know that Stefan was alive when I first discovered him, but I think Richard Green, the fiddle player, had gone to Paris and had met Stefan. Stefan, I'm not sure what year that was, probably late 60s, had a job. He was a great piano player too. And he was playing in the Hilton Paris Hotel in the lounge, playing piano. In fact, that's how he got his start, playing for silent movies, But, so I had heard that he was, still around. And I guess a guy named Diz Disley, who was kind of fixture in the English music scene, was a guitar player. He introduced the Beatles, I think, at their first concert at Albert Hall. But he talked Stefan into getting back a group like the Hot Club of France. And they played the Cambridge Folk Festival, and I believe he had 2 guitar players, a bass, and Stefan, and they had an empty chair for Django, And so that he started playing gigs again in that format. And in 1976, they came to San Francisco. It was Ike Isaacs, a great English jazz guitar player, Diz Disley, a young bass player named Brian Torr, and Stefan. So of course I went down to the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco to hear these guys, and it was like amazing. I had just come out with my first quintet album, and I went down in the dressing room and I gave Stefan a copy. I just went down as a fan, and I gave him this album. And then a few years later, I had started doing some movie scores, and I got hired by Dino De Laurentiis to do a score for a movie called King of the Gypsies. Actually, his son Federico, who was producing the movie, had heard my first quintet record in Tower Records in Hollywood. They would happen to be playing it when he was in there, and he said, "This is the music I want." So I was on my first tour in Europe in the summer of '77 with Bill Keith, actually. And I got a message that I had got this job writing music for this film. So I went down and came back and met the director and the producer. And they wanted live music in the movie as well as in the score. So I was put in charge of finding a band, a gypsy band, putting a gypsy band together. And they had to look like gypsies and sound like gypsies, I guess. after about a month or two of going around to Hungarian, Russian restaurants, eating a lot of goulash, the light bulb went off, and I said, maybe Stefan Grappelli would be the perfect guy for this, you know. And the producer, director, they never heard of Stefan Grappelli, but fortunately, he was playing a gig in New York around that time. They went down to hear him, and they hired him to be in this movie. So I'll never forget the day that I got together with Stefan for the first time, and I had written this music. Was my birthday in 1978. And I always remember that, and I know that I was destined to be in the record business because I was born in 45 and I was 33 in 78. But I got together with Stefan and showed him these tunes, and we did this movie together, and then he invited, he had a gig in San Francisco somewhat after that, invited me down to sit in with him, and my whole band, Tony Rice and Carol Anger, we all went down and sat in with him. And then I guess my manager got a call from his manager wanting to know if my band would back up Stefan for a tour, 3-week tour, 1979, and that's. We played on The Tonight Show and did all these concerts and did several more tours in Europe and various other places through the years.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Del a question. We've all heard stories from guys who either knew people that worked with Bill Monroe or worked with Bill Monroe, and what's the real skinny on it? How was it working for Bill?
Well, you know, I'll tell you, that was probably some of the easiest work I ever really did, was to work, except I had to learn.
Not like this.
Not like this, no. Before I went to work for Bill, you know, I had sang all parts in any band I was in. I could sing. I could even sing bass. If the note got too low, I'd just open my mouth and make it look like I was singing. But I knew I wouldn't have any trouble singing with him. It was learning all the words that I had to, all the verses to songs that he'd written and recorded, you know. But that was the hardest thing. But as far as working for Bill Monroe, I had no problem. But, you know, the only thing he expected out of a musician was to get on stage. When you get on stage with him, work hard. Some guys are lazy, you know, they don't want to work. But we kind of grew up the same way. He grew up on a farm working hard, and I did too, you know. I grew up on a dairy farm in York County, and of course we had to work pretty hard, and he just expected you to work hard, and if you did that, he would never say anything to you. And a lot of times I'd think, well, why don't he tell me how to do certain things, you know, but he wouldn't. And then, you know, later in life, I kind of figured him out. You know, if you think back about it, you know, all the guys that worked for him, he kind of sang to his lead singers, whoever they were, like Lester Flatt, Clyde Moody, whoever, you know, Jimmy Martin. He sang to that lead singer, and I think he liked that.
Is that the reason why, despite the fact that all those lead voices were totally different in the way they sounded, the band always sounded pretty much the same?
Yeah, it's funny. It did, you know, especially Bill's part. You know, he was always right there with that mandolin. You know, it was probably it was the main rhythm probably of his bands all through the years. You know, even though he played lead, he used that mandolin for rhythm, and I'm not sure that they did before Bill Monroe. Did they use a mandolin for?
Not like he did. He
For rhythm,
really
yeah.
turned it into a rhythm instrument.
Yeah.
And, with that chop, which of course evolved, you know.
Yeah.
You listen to the earliest recordings with his brother Charlie, the Monroe brothers, is more of a flowing kind of rhythm, and even in the early Bluegrass Boys recording. But you know, I think as the years went on, maybe it was because he got some guys in there that, you know, needed it.
Yeah. But, no, it was easy. I liked working for him. For some reason, I didn't last long. I just,
Well,
tell
you
what.
didn't get fired.
No, I didn't get fired. I'll tell you what, Kenny Baker quit. Kenny Baker was a great fiddler from eastern Kentucky. And Bill Monroe used to introduce him as the finest fiddler in bluegrass. Of course, he liked his style. Now, Ralph Rensler, he managed Bill when I was there. And Ralph liked people like Bobby Hicks.
Yeah.
He liked better than Kenny Baker. He said, now, Kenny Baker, he plays too sweet. Of course, I like what he did.
Poor guy,
I kind of, to be honest with you, I kind of agree with Ralph.
I know.
I mean, I like the bluesier.
Yeah.
So Kenny was great,
Yeah, it's true. I could tell the difference in the two, but
I think Bill liked old time fiddle tunes, and Kenny was great at that.
he was, yeah.
People like Vassar, Clements, and Bobby Hicks. They had this bluesy thing going on.
David, I see you got your mandolin there. You guys want to do a song? You don't have to do that if you don't want to.
We probably need to practice.
Hey, we didn't tune up. You think it'll be all right if we ain't tuned?
Right here?
Talk while you too.
There you go. That's
Now, hey,
See if this thing is still in tune.
we played, when was the last time we played together, David? A month?
Newport Folk Festival.
Oh, that's right.
That's right, yeah.
Oh yeah, Grapevine. Is that?
Now, David's playing the old one, I'm playing the new one.
Yeah.
This is my new Martin. They gave this to me. Yeah.
Yeah, Gibson ain't giving me a mandolin yet.
I probably use this one.
Well, it did in 1981, but that don't count.
Yeah.
See, where are you? Not bad.
Hey, if I showed you my new tuner?
No,
I showed
it's
David my
inside
new tuner here. It's right in here. And I don't know who gave me this.
Used to be able to have to hear the tune. Now you got to be able to see.
Sometimes I wonder if I can do either one. That's not too bad, David.
Well, we were talking about Bill Keith. We do a little medley of tunes that Bill Keith recorded with Bill Monroe. I can't make this sound like a banjo, but it's in A. I don't know if I can play this stuff, but give it a whirl. This is a little medley. See who can guess the names of these tunes.
Another couple minutes. I think we're going to hear Del sing something.
You gotta get Dale to sing one. Okay. Sure.
Yeah, we'll do that number here, I reckon. Oh, that'll work on it. Do it again. Sorry about that. On a long mountain journey I'm going. Oh, darling, please don't you cry. For in shackles and chains they will take me to a prison to stay till I die. And at night through the bars I will gaze at the stars and long for your kisses in vain. A piece of stone I will use for my pillow. My companions will be shackles and chains. Put your arm through these bars once, my darling. Let me kiss those sweet lips I love best. In heartache, you're my consolation. In trouble, my haven of rest. And at night through the bars I will gaze at the stars. And when stars were in vain, a piece of stone I will use for my pillow while I'm sleeping in shackles and chains.
All right. All right, our thanks to David Grisman, Del McCoury, and I'll tell you folks, I've been hanging around this place since 1972, and I can stop now.
We got our new CD at the merch counter.